Foresight. This is Mekelle, producer and host of the show. With me today is Miliete Birhanemeskel. She's a prominent activist, Tigray activist, and a media TV host. So Miliete, welcome to Mekelle Foresight.
Thank you, Mekelle. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Diaspora activists not only are the voice to their repressed, downtrodden communities back home, but also play a crucial role in their global fight for equality, freedom, the pursuit of justice and human dignity. Generations of Tigrayans have lived in many parts of the world, some engaging in some form of activism. But the level of activism we are witnessing today among Tigrayans is unprecedented. Miliete Birhanemeskel is one of the leading faces of the Stop War on Tigray. She has been a prominent voice exposing the large-scale, devastating, weaponized sexual gender-based violence in the war on Tigray. She has been at the forefront of this movement. She has gained popularity for her bold media sparring, taking on other activists who call themselves members of the Ethiopian diaspora activists. Miliete Birhanemeskel, welcome to Mekelle Foresight again.
Thank you.
Just to give you, to give our viewers the context, let me just play a segment of what you said during the third anniversary of TMH. Your elevator pitch. I find this in tune with the bigger picture, the one that you raised in that discussion. Do we as Tegaru have a collective story that we agree on? So maybe we can start with that, shed more light on that. Also, if that story is widely shared by the Tegaru diaspora and that it is driving their activism.
Yes. Thank you for that question. I think it is a really powerful question, and it wasn't mine. I know you know who Dade is. Dade Desta is one of our, yes, he's incredible. I mean, he's one of the best storytellers that we have. And he obviously does that through news outlet and telling news stories, but he's an incredible storyteller, very talented man. And during the Tigray Media House 3-year anniversary, there was a magnificent panel that was talking about history and just connecting so many dots. And in that conversation, he asked a question that I have not been able to shake. And he asked, do we, as a people, as Tigrayans, have a collective story? And do we agree on what that collective story is? And I have to tell you, it was really powerful. And of all the things that were said, it is what stood with me the most, because every powerful nation has a powerful story. And as Tegaru and Tigrayans, and especially in the diaspora, we have a problem. And our problem is that we've allowed other people outside of our community to tell our story and to define who we are. And these are not, generally when that happens, they are not friendly narratives about who you are. And so to me, I thought this is a challenge that we have to undertake. We have to figure out, do we have a collective story, and what is that collective story? If you look at how, for example, Ethiopia tells our story. I mean, depending on who the person is, we're either beggars who can't feed our families, or we're cannibalistic billionaires who have robbed the land. I mean, it's ridiculous and outlandish, the stories that you hear. So as Tegaru, the challenge is, what is our story? And so when I had an opportunity the following day to address various people, media personalities, different singers, and just different people in the community, different activists, that was my question to them. And I said, we have to have an elevator pitch. What is our elevator pitch? And you know what that is. It's basically, if you have 30 seconds to convince someone of something, basically the time it takes to ride an elevator from the first floor to the third floor, can you do it? And I would be willing to guess that if you asked 100 Tigrayans our story, you would get 100 answers. And so, of course, I gave my pitch, and my pitch is just a starting place. And I think we have a long way to go to develop that, but it should be urgent and we should do it now. But mine is simple. The first and most important thing is that we are indigenous people and we are protectors of our land. And we are a spiritual and fair people. And I think we have to express that because the stories being told about us are so different and not true. Also that we are protectors of our land. Tigray has been the first line of defense and has won so many battles for Ethiopia to protect its people. And we don't get credit for that. In fact, they call us traitors. And there's nothing more treasonous than inviting a foreign nation into your country to rape and pillage your people, which is what happened to Tigrayans. And so we have to make that clear. And most importantly, that we are a people who fight subjugation with every ounce of our being. And I think that those are the areas where we find commonality, because Tigrayans are not a monolith. We're very different, a very diverse people, even though we're a small indigenous population. But we have to be able to find what that common story is and tell that story ourselves.
Yeah, and I must say your message, your elevator pitch is not only simple, but also very succinct, very articulate. So it's very important that how we package our messages, as important as the message itself sometimes. Yeah, can you just walk us through the genesis of this burgeoning Tigrayan diaspora activism that we see unfolding today?
Yeah, that is like something I am so proud of, and not because I had some significant role in it. I didn't. I am like so many others who are in the diaspora. And let's be honest, it started out as a scramble. Because I'm sure you remember, and I think were in Tigray at the time, but we were here, and it was election night in the United States, and I was at home watching Donald Trump lose, and a friend came over and she was in tears, a Tigrayan friend, and I'm like, "Why are you crying? Donald Trump is losing." And she says, "No, they've started war in Tigray. They're bombing Tigray," is what she said. And I'm like, who's they? There was this whole thing that happened, and it was a scramble, and we didn't know what to do. And so it started out with, we lost touch with our families. We were hearing certain things, bits of information were coming out, refugees were pouring into Sudan. And it was like almost deja vu, because I was born from that same thing. I was born in Sudan. So I have it was doing all these things to me personally. But from a perspective of the diaspora and the youth, it started out as, we want to reach our families. How are our families? And so there wasn't a lot of organization. It was pretty chaotic. But within months, you had different groups forming, maybe a dozen or so groups. You had Health Professionals Network of Tigray, HPN, an amazing organization focusing on health. You had like SJT and GSTS and, these different groups that were more focused on advocacy. You had Omna Tigray rise out of all of that, Tigray Action Committee. All of these groups started forming, and it was fast and it was powerful, and it had an impact quickly. I mean, if you really think about what the Tigrayan diaspora did, they put Tigray on the map on an international level in less than, I want to say, in the first 6-7 months of the genocide. And if they hadn't, imagine where we would be. Because even with all of that, I could walk into a grocery store, and I always wear my, my necklace, and the clerk at the cashier in the grocery store sees my necklace and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish our government was doing more." I mean, to that level, that's how heroic the work is that the Tigrayan diaspora did. So it was really beautiful to watch, and just how they use media and, were able to pull this together. I mean, that's obviously not enough, but it was an important and critical first step, because there was a complete communication blackout. So nothing was coming out of, very little was coming out of Tigray. And so it took every single person who was outside of Tigray to raise this conversation to the level that it needed to be at. So, to me, it was Herculean work.
Yeah, something to be proud of, by all together. And you said, all these atrocities were happening in the dark. To what extent was this activism of the Tigrayans in the diaspora, grounded, to what extent does it reflect the situation on the ground, given the communications blackout, and how was it coordinated across the globe? Because this activism, this diaspora movement is everywhere, in Europe, in America, in Africa, in the Middle East, what have you.
Yeah. The resistance on the ground in Tigray very much aligned with the energy, I think, that we had in the diaspora. The more we learned, the angrier we got. You know, when we learned about Mona Lisa and what happened to her and how she was raped and lost her limb and all of the things, or she actually fought her rapist back, fought being raped, and it cost her a limb. And so that resistance that we saw from our families, it really emboldened and empowered us to keep fighting, even though it felt like at times we were banging our heads against a wall and you weren't getting anywhere, and you talked to your senator and you talked to your, different representatives, and there were some coordinated efforts around that, like some messaging that was happening, but it was largely just, tweets, right? You're telling people, could you tweet this to your senator, or can you call your senator? Here's a script. And, it was very, it could have been better coordinated, but we were also caught off guard. But the more we learned about what was happening to our families, I think, and their resistance to it, the stronger that we got, until it got to a point now where you have very coordinated efforts to meet with different people who are the actual decision makers. That was another thing. I think it took us a while to figure out that every senator wasn't as significant as some, or every representative, and I'm just speaking from the United States perspective, wasn't as significant. And so we were targeting some people, and they're just like, I have like 5 people in my district. It's not that big of a deal, and then there are certain people like Senator Menendez, who's willing to come out and say this is a genocide. And shout out to Tigrayan sister in, I think Lydia is her name, in California. I think Lydia is her name, I believe, who's been a powerful voice and a powerful connector with different legislators who can actually make a difference. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, indeed. So there's also the other side. There's asymmetry. There was asymmetry and still is, and polarization among the different sections of the Ethiopian diaspora. And how were the Tagaro diaspora faring in this regard? Given the media is dominated by the government inside the country, and even there is a lot of disproportion, even outside the country. So you mentioned in the third anniversary of the image also Chinua Achebe's quote, regarding the telling the story of the hunter and the hunt.
Yes. So I think one thing we learned very quickly is that only we will save ourselves. Only Tagaro will save ourselves. And so we learned that quickly. And then we figured out we're fighting this whole disinformation and misinformation campaign. And that was really hard because we were coming from a reactionary perspective. We were reacting to things that were being said about us, reacting to, the things that people were doing and the way they portrayed us. And that was a weak position to have. And so, I want to give you Chinua Achebe's exact quote. So Chinua Achebe is a Nigerian author who, if you grew up in the States, for sure was required reading at some point in probably middle school or something. But his story, Things Fall Apart, is basically a story about colonialism, but from an African point of view. And so it's a resistance story. It's a really powerful book. And one of his quotes is, "Until the lions have their own historians, the hunt will always glorify the hunter." And I may have been 13 years old when I read this book, and I never forgot that quote. I mean, never. And, it's interesting that it comes back to me now, well into almost middle age at this point. But until the lions have their own historians, the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And that was our issue. Our issue is that We allowed Ethiopia to continually define and tell our story, and that never worked out for us. And same now. I mean, think about my cadre. I personally went to Sudan, personally interviewed people from Western Tigray. Pretty much 99% of the refugees are Tigrayans. Most of them came from the Maikadra area and surrounding towns. And the stories are gruesome. The stories are horrific. The victims were Tigrayans. But the media and the government who controlled the narrative twisted it to say that Tigrayans were actually the attackers and the victims were other groups who live in that area. And so we need to, one thing that we have to remember is that we need to be in charge of that. But to get there, to be able to tell our own stories, we have to do a whole reconditioning of even how we see ourselves as Tigrayans, or deconditioning maybe is the word, but we have to take back and start from a clean slate and be able to take back our history. If you notice, Ethiopia is proud and takes ownership claims to a lot of the pride that comes from Tigray, but they claim that, and then they call us every name in the book and try to write us out of that story. So yeah, that it's a powerful tool if we can learn how to grasp it.
Some time back, you put out a notice. You were collecting screenshots or video of hate speech or various acts that fall into the genocide stages. Mm-hmm. So you ask people to share them with you. What came out of this project? You can share with us.
Yes, I would love to share that. So it's still an ongoing project. Basically, one thing that I noticed, and I'm sure many of us notice, is that the story about what's happening to Tigray is being boiled down to something it's not. And it's being boiled down to like ethnic strife or ethnic war. And it's bigger than that. What's happening in Tigray is genocide, clear as day genocide, just textbook. And so one of the frustrating things about having so many different things coming at us at once is that we haven't been able to organize that story so that it's clear for everyone else. It's clear to us because it's every minute of our being. We wake up thinking about Tigray and we go to bed thinking about Tigray. And so for us, it's clear what's happening, but not to the average person. So I had an idea, and it was influenced by a group called 24 Hours for Tigray. And they did a museum where they set up the 10 stages of genocide, and they put evidence under each stage. And it was either a story or a photo or something that related to that specific stage of genocide. And it was powerful to see everything laid out that way. And so the idea that I had was to do a 10-part like mini documentaries. They would be about 30 to 45 minutes each, where we lay out the stages of genocide. So each series is a different stage. And we put together subject experts, individual people who were targets of that particular act of genocide, and just lots and lots of evidence so that we can put a story together that we can then share on different platforms bigger than just our community. So because we already know what's happening. We need everyone else to know what's happening, and we need it to be clear for them as well. And so there are brilliant minds behind the work. I mean, we have everything in our community. We have videographers, we have editors, we have story writers. I mean, we have everything. So we're putting this sort of like a news documentary series together that we can then share with like a Netflix or PBS or something like that, and get a much larger audience to see what's happening to our people. So it's still coming. It's a big project, but it's coming along.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, hope you have an impact with these kinds of activities. I'm sure you will have an impact. So, if you can reveal for us how you were also, putting or leaving an imprint on the diplomatic front. Diplomacy requires, reaching out to the, corridors of power in Washington, New York, Brussels, Geneva. I'm talking in general, Tigrayan diaspora, but also in your situation, there are communities. For instance, the Black community, African Americans. How were you reaching out to them? Because now we see Abiy Ahmed trying, to portray himself as a Pan-Africanist, although he's trying to destroy, to annihilate Africans, who we are Africans, Tagaro. In fact, the defenders of the symbols of independence. We fought against colonialism, and we were at the center of, building, integrating Africa. So, what have you been doing in this respect?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you think about the Ethiopian government, this is a whole government, and they had millions of dollars at their disposal, including within the diaspora, like Ethiopian nationalists, I would say, who were paying, it's not an exaggeration, millions of dollars to lobbyists to help them tell their story, to help whitewash some of the crimes that were happening. And as Tigrayans, first of all, we were not organized enough at that moment to be able to deploy that type of money and to get that type of support. And so we had a different currency. Our currency was the love of our families and our willingness to fight for our families. And so we depended more on that. We in the diaspora became de facto ambassadors for Tigray. And so we had to figure out, okay, we don't have the millions of dollars. What do we have? How are we able to have the same impact? And so it took, I'm sure this is true for everyone all over in different parts of the world. We had to use our personal connections, or whether it's a friend of a friend, or maybe you did work with someone, and so you're able to kind of connect dots to get to the power players. And it's what I did for sure. Fortunately, I've been involved in Black Lives Matter and various movements around social justice in my community in Denver, Colorado, pretty much my entire life. So I knew a lot of people. I knew a lot of those grassroots kind of organizations. I've been on different boards and communities. So when I call to ask for something, it's not a cold call. They know me already. I'm already involved. So it was a little bit easier to make some of those connections, or for that group to connect me with a particular legislator. And that's really what it came down to, was making those connections. And I think it's a good lesson for Tigrayans about, yes, we're fighting for Tigray, but we have to have alliances. We have to build alliances. And so for those of us that had them, we were able to rely on that.
Let's now talk to the third generation of Tigrayan diaspora. It has come of age, and in terms of engagement with shaping the homeland of their parents and grandparents. Just give us a picture of how this succession is taking place.
Yeah, it's actually really beautiful. They're the ones actually who came up with the campaign of Tigray is Africa, because there was this whole narrative that was going out about, anti-colonialism and neo-imperialism. And that's not at all what this is about what's happening in Tigray. And so you have these brilliant people who can think and create video and animation and all of these things at the drop of a dime. And they really picked up. And these are people, by the way, who have never been to Tigray in many cases, never, who didn't necessarily identify as Tigrayans previously. They identified as perhaps Ethiopians or Ethiopian Americans or just Black Americans. And so that's actually the irony of this whole thing. Abiy sought out to destroy Weyane, and all he did was awake a sleeping giant. And that giant includes generations removed, young people who are now hyper focused on Tigray, hyper committed to Tigray, and who are easily finding their place in what's happening right now. It's powerful. It's everywhere. It's not, I'm in Colorado, I'm in the US, but I see it all over the world. And so this generation is having, no problem finding out where they fit, which I don't think was true pre-war. I think pre-war, we were a little bit lost. And so what this did was bring all of Tigray's children back home. it's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I think this also applies to, Tigrayans in Addis Ababa and elsewhere outside Tigray in Ethiopia. The crackdown and the incarceration that they are facing will only, consolidate this kind of feeling, contrary to what the Abiy and his cohorts are trying to achieve. Okay, so what challenge do you face when you, as personally, as Miliete, and your folks there? What are the challenges that you face as you do your activism?
Well, I think there are several challenges. There are personal challenges. For example, constantly being attacked. I think my car gets vandalized at least once a month. Someone slashes my tires, or, just someone maced me one time. So there are those kind of personal safety things that I worry about, especially because I have children. And so I'm a big girl, I can handle myself, but I don't want anyone to mess with my kids. So you have those kind of safety issues. That's not unique to me. We had a local Tigrayan auto dealership that was a victim of arson. Someone tried to burn down their shop. So these are the kinds of things that are happening to Tigrayans who are vocal and who speak up. And so there's that. But I always say, if Mona Lisa and all of our families, she just happens to be the face of resistance, but if they can survive a 16-month siege, then I can go get new tires, so that I kind of put that in perspective for myself. That's definitely one issue that we have. We've seen video of Tigrayans being attacked, when they counter protest and things like that. So that's one thing. But I'm going to be honest with you. One of our biggest challenges as Tigrayans, and this is probably a little controversial, so I hope people understand what I'm saying, but sometimes we're intolerant of different ideas. And as Tigrayans, I think we need to sometimes let our guard down and listen when another Tigrayan has a completely different idea about anything, be it an organizing approach, be it a how do you make allies approach, or the future of Tigray approach. I mean, we're all so hurt and so damaged by what has happened and what is still happening to our families that we take everything very personally. And so I think that we need to figure out that it's okay to disagree sometimes. It's okay to have different ideas, even if you don't like it, and may the best idea win. I think that's a lesson I think that we really need to take to heart. I've been at the center of controversy, saying things that other Tagaro didn't like, and I'm okay with that. You don't have to agree with me. Matter of fact, I've changed my mind sometimes as well when I've heard from people and different things. So, but I think we need to be just a little bit more tolerant and a little bit more open to differences.
Yeah, very, very, very important. Finally, looking forward, what do you want to see happening to transform the Tigrayan diaspora into a formidable force, into a formidable movement with a clout to significantly and sustainably influence diplomats, political actors, wherever they are?
Yeah, I think of a number of things. I think now that we're 16 months in to this genocide, and even longer, to be honest, there's been a low-grade aggression happening way before the actual genocide began. But I think now we have more solid footing, and different organizations have made their mark, and we know who does what better than others. So I think that where we're at now, we need to try and see less duplication. So if we don't all need to be doing the same thing, is my point. We have some really strong advocacy groups. We have some really strong groups that are doing work on the ground. So if we can have less duplication and more collaboration, I think we could get a lot further, a lot faster. I think we absolutely need to get clear on our story. And I think that's a role for all of the media personalities, the social media personalities, the news side, all of it. I think if we can help hone that in and make that more clear, I think that will inform our activism, and I think it's important. So I think we need to get clear on our story, and we also need to focus on making the world understand that this is genocide that's happening to our families. It's being boiled down to ethnic violence, and it's way bigger than ethnic violence. You're starting to see religious artifacts show up for sale on eBay, for God's sake. These are, valuable items that, especially for us, is our history and our culture. So I think we just need to get stop duplicating, get clearer on our story, and be more hyper focused on getting the message of genocide across.
Well, we have come to the end of the interview. Thank you very much, Miliete, for this very impressive discussion. And I hope I will count on your, on your support whenever I need such kind of discussions in future.
Thank you so much. Tigray
Tigray.